You know, there's a thin line between being paranoid and being reasonably cautious. However, for me, I don't come anywhere near that line. I'm just straight up paranoid. But this is the Mississippi King welcoming y'all back to more Let's Play Mega Man 2. And in this episode, we're actually going to tackle the rest of the Robot Masters. Starting with Heatman. So welcome back, Mississippi Dukes. And admittedly, Heatman's stage is one of the least interesting in the game. I mean, I know I've said a lot of great things about Mega Man 2 so far, and there is a lot of good things about this, but I don't know, this stage just seems kind of generic, shall we say? And, admittedly, the music isn't one of my favorite tracks. Also, on that note, actually, I feel I should say that, back when I first played Mega Man 2, Metal Man's stage, and Flashman's stage for that matter, they were some of, what I thought were, the weakest tracks in the game. With that said, I mean, my opinion has definitely grown on them, and now I think they're some of my favorite tracks in the game. Oh, and about the Metal Blade, I feel I should have explained this in the last episode, but basically, it works like the Mega Buster, except that you can shoot it in all 8 directions, and it uses such a small amount of weapon energy. I mean, it is really good. It's just crazy how little weapon energy it uses. It's like a viable alternative to the Mega Buster. Also, as for the part in Heatman's stage I was telling y'all about, this is it. The disappearing blocks of doom are back, and they're a staple for the series. Ain't that just swell? You can use the item to just hover right over it. It's no problem, really. And apparently a good point about Heatman is living. I'm not quite sure I get that, but he was designed after Fireman, and we blew up Fireman in the last game, so I guess that's supposed to be his good point? Yeah, I don't get it either. But, yeah, that's a good point about him. He's not dead. But we are soon going to change that. That won't be his good point for much longer. No, seriously, Heatman is pretty easy. I mean, with or without his weakness, he's pretty ridiculously easy. You just keep shooting him before he's allowed to. Just don't let him shoot at you. Don't let him shoot the fire by shooting him first, and then just jump over him when he dashes to you, and he should go down no problem. And another thing I should have mentioned about Metal Man is that he actually dies with his own weapon in 2 hits. Yes, you heard that right, 2 hits with his own weapon. He's absolutely pathetic. That's even more pathetic than Cutman, because, Cutman also dies with his own weapon in 2 hits. But then if you miss him once, then you can't use that. You can't kill him in 2 hits. And when you refight him, you can't use his weakness to attack him. So, yeah, for the Metal Blade, that's not an issue. So he's even more pathetic than Cutman! Metal Man goes down absurdly easy with his weapon. I mean, I'm going to be using that in the boss rush. Just so that y'all can see me. And bear in mind, this is on difficult mode. He dies with his own weapon on difficult mode. I'm not playing on normal mode. So yeah, he's that easy on difficult mode, and he dies with only one hit on normal. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, now we're tackling Flashman, and he's also an easy robot master. Actually, I don't really think any of the robot masters are particularly difficult. I mean, Quickman can be kind of tricky, but I can beat him without his weakness. He's no Elect Man, that's for sure. And as for the rest, like, I really can beat this game, the Robot Masters, in practically any order just cause they're that easy. Bear in mind, this is on difficult mode. I feel I should stress that. Difficult mode is, well, it's actually not that hard. If you ask me, this definitely isn't the hardest of the original 3 Mega Man games. Actually, if you ask me, the hardest of the 3 is Mega Man 3. Despite having one of the easier Wily Castles in the game, in the series, that is. There are some Robot Masters in that game that are just really tricky. And actually, Heatman is pretty pathetic. And his weapon, the Atomic Fire, well, that's sort of like an item where it's like, I appreciate the concept more than the execution. You'll see what I mean later on, but basically it allows you to charge your shot up to a 3rd level. Like, you have the regular, and then medium, and then the high charge, which uses a ton of weapon energy. It just uses so much weapon energy that it's not really that viable. So, like, here's the Atomic Fire in action. You can just, like, charge it up, and you see how I'm getting butchered with it? It's not that great of a weapon. It takes a while to charge, and that can end up with some utter carnage like this. And as for the Leaf Shield, which is Woodman's weapon, basically it works by, like, you form a shield by pressing the button, and so it like forms, and then when you press the D-pad in a direction, it sends it flying in that way, so that's how that works. So this is why I kept coming this way, so I can get all this neat stuff. And you can also end up dying right there because I was being really foolish with using the Atomic Fire, but I wanted to show it off, so it's like it's not that much of a loss. Anyway, the Leaf Shield actually kind of became a staple for the series, so that's another thing Mega Man 2 standardizes, is the shield weapon. And now we're fighting Flashman, and he goes out in the blink of an eye. I mean, talk about blink and you miss it. Like, that fight's already over. I wasn't even paying much attention to him, and he went down. He just, like, dropped dead, like, at the drop of a hat. He's pathetic. Anyway, his weapon is actually the Crash Bomber, and that's, well, I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. It's a decent weapon, but it sort of suffers from a similar problem to the Hyper Bomb in the first Mega Man game. You can't really just detonate it by pressing the button, but basically it attaches to walls, and it blows up then. And you can't detonate it whenever it attaches. Like, you have to wait for it to detonate, and that is pretty annoying, if I do say so myself. But nevertheless, we're tackling Flashman next. And why am I tackling him last? His weapon is probably the worst in the game. I mean, it sounds awesome on paper because basically his weapon allows you to stop time. which sounds a lot more useful than it actually is, because it's like, once you stop time, you can't shoot, and you can't cancel it out, so like, you're stuck with it. You can't just like, switch to something else so that like, you can conserve weapon energy. It kinda sucks like that. I mean, there are some points in which it can be useful, like in Quickman's stage, but I don't really need to use it. I mean, I can get past the force beams just fine. Also, another thing that Mega Man 2 standardized is the way that underwater works. Like, once you're underwater, you jump higher. So yeah, that's another thing that this game standardized. There are a lot of things that this game standardized for the series. There's just a lot to love about this game, folks. I think another thing that this game standardized is, like, the item 2 actually kind of reoccurs throughout the series. I mean, it's not exactly the same as it is in Mega Man 2, but it does sort of show up in future games. And as for item 1, it just sort of releases a platform that floats up slowly. And it kind of reappears in Mega Man 4, but it's not as common as, like, it doesn't appear as often as, like, item 2 in the form of something that we will get into when we get to Mega Man 3. Be patient, folks. So now we're going to tackle Flashman, and I realize his weakness is actually the Crash Bomb, the Crash Bomber, but, I can't really seem to, well, I mean, I ain't got that much weapon energy, so I'll just use the Metal Blade, which is pretty effective as well. And of course, Flashman is pretty slow, so it should be fairly easy to dodge. Pretty simple. Or I could just straight up die, that works too. Anyway, another thing that Mega Man 2 standardized yet another is, well, I should have explained this earlier, but you notice the colored canisters that you see around with the big E on them? Those are called energy tanks. And what they do is they refill all of your life bar. So you just use one and it will refill your entire life bar. So it's like you no longer have to fight bosses on just one health bar. And you don't gotta go grinding for energy as much. But I don't really need to use them, like, I can beat this game without energy tanks. And I can also beat Mega Man 3 and 4 without energy tanks as well. I think also Mega Man 5, but admittedly that's one of the something else that I don't know. Anyway, here's another thing that Mega Man 2 standardized. When you go to the Wily Castle, or whatever castle shows up in the game, it actually displays kind of a map of your general direction for each stage, and it actually shows you where you are and where you're going, so, as well as an image of the castle before you start each stage, so that's pretty neat, I must say. It's definitely, well, it's definitely appreciated. But now we're tackling Wily's Stage 1, and its music has just become legendary among Mega Man fans, and with good reason. It's probably one of the best Wily themes in the series. Well, I mean, I'd say it's easily in my top 5, probably even in my top 3. I'm serious, folks. It's that good. But there are also some other amazing ones, so it's not like Mega Man 2 has a monopoly on great music in the series. Believe me, there are plenty. But yeah, this is, as you can see, the item 3 actually attaches to walls and allows you to, and it slowly moves up them. It's alright. I mean, generally speaking, in most instances, item 1 is preferable because it actually goes up without the need for any walls, but in some cases there are some, like, really narrow walls, and, like, where you can't fit item 1 in, and so it won't go up, so for stuff like that, the item 3 can actually work better. To take care of them enemies before, I often like to use the bubble lead, or bubble lead. Actually, I looked it up, and apparently, the bubble lead is pronounced in Japan as babudu reed, so apparently it's supposed to be pronounced as bubble lead. I always assumed it was just bubble lead because, like, it's gray, so it kind of looks like it would contain lead, and it would also explain why it moves down walls and it descends and never rises. And of course, I guess that may explain why it actually does damage, but whatever, I guess it's actually the bubble lead. My mistake. All these years I've been wrong! It's not the first time that's happened, but whatever. You don't want to use too much of the bubble lead in this part in Wily Castle because, we'll get to that later, but just trust me, you don't want to use too much of it. We're actually getting to the boss of this place, and, it's called, like, after a tricky jump you kind of have to make. It's a bit of a nuisance, but the boss for Wily Stage 1 is called the Mega Dragon. And I'm not really sure whether to classify it as tricky, because it's like, it really depends, because it's like there's this whole thing with, like, knockback, and that can kill you, and also you don't want to touch him. The info card will say that. But yeah, just like before, I'm not using the Mega Man and Base cards for the Wily bosses. I'm just putting in my own information. But nevertheless, he's fairly easy, but he can also be kind of tricky. He's easier to fight than a secret shaman, but is no good cult cabal of South Korea that is bent on instilling a crypto-fascist dictatorial system. Now, I used the quick boomerang against this boss because it shaves his health down really quickly, but you can also use the atomic fire, but I would recommend strongly against doing that. You can also use the Crash Bomber, but I would recommend even more strongly against using that, because you need it. Like, I'm not just saying that it helps for a boss, like, you can't beat the game without it. We'll get to that later, but I hate that part. Anyway, I guess that's all for this episode, so see you next time. This is the Mississippi King signing out, and in the next video, we'll continue at Wily Castle and reach the end. Close to it, anyway.